This idea of citizen experience, really, I think the phrase was really coined by Sid Harrell, who's in the back of the room over here somewhere. She is a member of this community of people who practice something that's quite an evolved discipline called user experience. No, there you are, Sid, sorry. So user experience people know about. In fact, it was just a couple months ago, UX Week was here in this room, and you had several hundred of the sort of top practitioners of this idea of user experience. But Sid's saying, look, can we apply this to the citizen space? And I think it's still a pretty emergent idea, an emergent discipline, but I think with people like Sid thinking about this, it's going to get to be much more sophisticated over the coming years. But what I'd say that now is that we don't exactly know what it means. I think Sid has been the one who's defined it most. But I want to talk a little bit about what that might mean in sort of the possibility space before we have our panelists out here. So I want to start with this a story, my personal experience of the New Orleans team. And you saw these guys yesterday. Amir Revis-Bey, the guy with the yellow background here, came back from New Orleans in the middle of the summer and happened to be in the office. I said, how was your trip? He said, it was really great. I went and demoed this application to these community groups that we had used in our research, and I showed it to them, and I had little old ladies come up and hugging me, thanking me for this. And I was like, that's interesting. You know, how often do you hear about that? And I thought, okay, Code for America has been about efficiency, participation, and transparency. You know, is it really also about hugs? Is that sort of the more important thing? It's an expression of emotion. And it made me think about this notion that, that Scott Silverman, who had pointed out the very first day of Code for America last year, which is that he said to me, look, I'm here because I believe that interfaces to government can be simple, beautiful, and easy to use. And so I'm tying Amir's story together with Scott's understanding of this and saying, what is society like when we offer these interfaces to government that are simple, beautiful, and easy to use? What would society be like if we felt about government the way we feel about our iPhones or our Android phones? And I've been asking that question around the country, and I think it's making people think differently about how citizens and government might interact. But now I ask, what would society be like if we felt about government the way we feel about Super Mayor Emanuel? Because I just love what Ben Sheldon did. This is just a funny little thing. Mayor Emanuel jumps every time a service request changes hands in Chicago. It's so unfair to love that one so much, but it was just so funny. Yeah, so this is sort of a joke, but it also has a point. You might have noticed that our fellows have a lot of personality, and we encourage them to really express that personality. And I think that's an important thing. Everybody we've met that works in city government has a great personality too, but sometimes we feel that government needs to be very official and use very official language. And I don't know that that always helps us. Yes, I think we can't always be funny and quirky, and we're going to see something else that's funny and quirky and sort of gets you thinking in a minute. But I also think that language and that kind of informal interaction is very important. This caught me very early on. Flickr is now, 10 years old. They were trying to explain to people how they wanted everyone to engage in their community. And often when you're doing that, you write these terms of service and these community guidelines, and you're trying to explain what you mean, what's appropriate behavior and what's not appropriate behavior. And they just went with this: don't be creepy. You know that guy. Don't be that guy, right? That's so much more effective in some ways. And we see it, there's so many examples, but one I love is from Open Counter, which you're going to hear this afternoon. Ruthie Bandor is going to talk about this. They're trying to help people through the process of getting business permits. And there's all these different forms that you have to fill out, and it's very frustrating. And you've already filled out a couple, and you get to the point where you also have to do a zoning clearance, and that's the part where people start to go, oh my God, this is so, why do I have to do this? Government is so burdensome. And in the application, right at that point, you're served up this message. Zoning basically makes sure a rubber factory can't open next to a preschool. Well, yeah, who wants to live in a community where your kids are breathing toxic fumes? You go, okay, right, I'm part of a community. This is sort of the ways that we navigate living together in a space. I'm going to fill out that zoning form. It's not that big a deal. So the language is really important, and right now I'm talking about languages primarily in digital interfaces. But it's not just digital interfaces, I think. When we're gonna if we're going to define this notion of citizen experience, let's not just talk about web apps and mobile apps. We interact with our government, as someone said earlier, you know, it's not just when you're at your computer, it's when you're out in the city. Kieran Jane, who works in the city of Oakland, is here, is doing a project where she's trying to re-envision the building permit process and thinking about every step of the way. Things like, you know, you do have to have an inspector come out at the very end and make sure that you've complied with code, but there's a bunch of steps in between where you send out an inspector. You know, could you do that by Skype? Now, I don't know if she's got all the answers yet, but she's certainly asking the right questions. And she's asking them in an important way. She's doing a lot of research. Sid Harrell did a talk at Ignite last night called Citizens in the Mist, sort of riffing off Gorillas in the Mist, where she's encouraging everybody who works in government, whether it's your job or not, frankly, to do a little bit of research. Right? Get out there and talk to people who are standing in line, you know, in a government office or trying to get something done, and ask them how it's working for them. And my favorite point in her talk was, it's easy to get bogged down by a notion of a giant study, you know, and hiring researchers and anthropology, and but the biggest difference, as she said, is between, in terms of people to talk to, is between 0 and 1. Just go out there and talk to one person about what's going on and their experience with government, and then be smart enough to shut up and listen to their answer, which doesn't mean the first thing they say, but means waiting for them to say more and more and dig deeper into what they're really feeling. And I think that her point is that starts a lot of other stuff. So I think there's a bunch of questions that we're going to ask ourselves as we think about citizen experience. But I think a lot of the examples I've given you so far are really about taking the expectations that we have as consumers, often in a retail environment, or transacting something here, I'm getting a building permit, and grafting it on to the government context. And I think that's important because we do come with expectations. But I don't want it to stop there. I think that citizen experience will be fundamentally different from consumer experience in a lot of ways. I mean, in some ways you could say, well, it's the ones you're forced to do, right? You want to remodel your house, you have to go get the permits to do it. So is it just an effective transaction that's easy, but that are the ones that you have to do? I think that it needs to be more than that, because as we've seen, sure, when you buy something, then you then own it. Well, when you buy government, what do you own, right? You own being part of something greater than yourself. And I think when I think about citizen experiences, it's not just a smooth transaction. It's an understanding that when you report a pothole, that maybe several hundred other people in your community have reported that pothole today, and maybe some of them are bigger than yours, like the one that John showed the other, the giant pothole that you fall into. That one might be more important than yours, and that you're understanding that you might need to prioritize your own needs to be part of something greater. And so there's a bunch of questions about citizen experience to me that lead me back to, if you're really thinking about how you fit into the whole, then citizen experience is really just another expression of government as a platform.